John Lynch just gave his first public comments on the Brock Purdy contract negotiations from the Combine, and all I'll say is this. Don't buy that number 13 jersey just yet. We'll talk about that and more on today's Gold Standard podcast, brought to you by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino. What is good, everybody? Welcome to the Gold Standard podcast on the Gold Standard and the Fans First Sports Network. I'm Rob Stats Guerrero. 11 Black's going to hop in a minute, and joining us from Indianapolis is Jason Aponte. Jason, thanks for hopping in once again.
You got it, Rob. I'm very interested to hear this take of yours about Brock Purdy because I literally thought this was a pretty uneventful press conference, but I have a feeling you're going to change my mind on this.
I completely disagree with you. I think it was quite eventful, and here's what we're going to do. We will play the comments because Tracy Sandler put them on X from her phone, which thank you very much, Tracy, since the Niners didn't stream this press conference anywhere. So I will play it. Listen to the second half of what John Lynch said. I thought it was very, very important.
We have started negotiations. We're talking. I won't go into negotiations like always is our stance. I want Brock to be our quarterback as long as we're here and beyond, and we'll leave it at that. I think the final thing, there's no guarantees that we get something done, but my experience has been when both sides are motivated, there's ample opportunity to do so, and we've been able to do that. So, go on.
Okay. Jason, for him to say in the first public comments, talking about the Brock Purdy contract situation, there's no guarantee a contract gets done. That's not an accident. It didn't just slip out from John Lynch. I think this thing is far from done.
Well, I didn't think that this thing was going to be wrapped up in March, but I think what he said is very matter of fact. And I'm a person that likes to operate in a range of outcomes. So the range of outcomes are this thing doesn't get done and Brock Purdy ends up playing with somebody else. Now, what is the probability of that? It's pretty low. So for me, I didn't really take too much away from that other than that was a matter of fact thing. And I think there's been times, especially when there's been contract negotiations about whether the guy is going to leave or stay. I really didn't take too much from that, Rob. I really think that was just a matter of fact statement. And that is something that is in the range of outcomes, but it's not a strong possibility. And I think John is just saying things that are a matter of fact and not really. I just have a tough time believing that he would leak something like that because he's just so good at media and being the master of coach speak at this point as the 49ers GM.
When I look at that article that Tim Kawakami came out with, talking about how upset the 49ers were because they paid Nick Bosa and Deebo and Brandon Aiyuk, they paid all this money and they weren't happy about that. Now all of a sudden you're in talks with your quarterback, the most expensive guy out of all those guys, and your general manager says, well, there's no guarantee things are going to get done. What that says to me is the Niners do not want to offer Brock Purdy top of the market money, and maybe they're not willing to pay him his number, and maybe they're just not going to do it.
Counterpoint, though, to this thing is you would like to hear Lynch say, hey, we're going to get this thing done. But yesterday, Cincinnati's general manager says, yeah, I'm bringing back T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Trey Hendrickson, and T. Higgins tweets out Cap. So, so just because you feel confident about it, does the player? I think, again, this is all just something that we're probably going to look back on later on and is going to be a little bit of a nothing burger. I think it was just a matter of fact statement. So no matter what, if he was bullish and he said, hey, you know what, we're definitely going to get this thing done. And Brock Purdy was one of those guys and he was just like, hey, I don't know where you're getting your news from, something like that. It would just add another layer. But I'm not necessarily as worried about it. I think they will find whatever ground it is. And I think Brock is going to get everything that he believes he's owed and what's going to be good for the team moving forward.
Brisbee Life on Twitch, shout out to the Twitch fam, says, saddle up, the carousel is starting again. The Unfaithful Perspective says, wait, what? There's no way that Lynch's statement meant nothing. You don't say that about your franchise quarterback straight up. I agree, Jason. And look, Jimmy Garoppolo signed on February 8th, in 2018. When Christian McCaffrey held out, the Niners got it done in 2 seconds, right quick and in a hurry. And I get that the contract is more complicated, but they could have engaged Brock Purdy in negotiations the second the regular season ended, They've had months to work on this already. So the fact that Lynch is saying that at the Combine publicly, I don't think it was a throwaway comment. It doesn't mean Brock won't sign. It doesn't mean that this all can't get done, wrapped up right quick and in a hurry, but that was a giant red flag for me. I'm sorry.
I don't think that it means nothing, but it doesn't mean everything. Like the idea that this is like some sort of panic, inducing statement, I think that's largely overblown. But what I will say about the Jimmy Garoppolo situation was Jimmy Garoppolo wasn't engaged in an open free agent, signing. They got that done quietly behind closed doors. Nobody knew that that was coming. So this is something that's kind of just been on the way. It doesn't mean that the statement is nothing. It's still something because it is matter of fact, but it doesn't mean like crack each other's heads open and feast on the goo inside. Like we don't have to panic based off of that. I just think that it's not nothing, but it's not everything. Like that's the part that I'm trying to get at.
I'm not panicking.
Not
because-
you, not you, not you, not
Yeah.
you. It's just the whole idea of the comment coming across like, how can you say it's not nothing? I guess I read those comments, or when I hear them, I read them in like that sort of tone. So maybe I'm off, but it's not like it's panic inducing, or it's something that like now all of a sudden we need to start, you know, being worried about the fact that Brock's not gonna be here.
I continue to say that this thing needs to get done before the start of the new league year so the Niners know exactly what they
Correct.
have in free agency.
Mhm.
Look, Jay, I'm just going to say it. I heard rumors last year that they were looking to trade up for a quarterback. So
Mhm.
I don't know how in love with Brock Purdy they are. I think maybe they only love him at a certain price.
Right. And that's fair. And I think that's what any negotiation, right? At certain times. That's why T. Higgins can't get a deal done, is because he feels he's owed more and they want to hit him with a franchise tag and he won't sign until that's the crux of any negotiation. Every single team is trying to get the player back at their price, and the player is trying to get their price. Now, who meets in the middle and who cracks and bends, that's the stuff that we're not privy to when it comes to a negotiation. But I think every single team is trying to get their player back at their price, except for, in the case of Cincinnati, Jamar Chase being the highest paid non-quarterback, which, that's their fault for not getting that done because he went out and had a triple crown season. Now you got to throw him the bag. But I think every team does that, Rob, in my opinion.
Nick Ellert says, Jason, Mason Graham, Niners rumors. What do you hear?
Yeah, that's definitely something. So if we put the pieces together when it comes to, we were talking about it yesterday with Kawakami talking about a defensive lineman move up, and then like I said, the article from PFF comes out that the 49ers are a prime team to trade up for defensive lineman, and then naming Mason Graham. I don't think any of those things are all coincidences. And when you listen to people talk around, it's like the 49ers are hell bent on finding a defensive tackle that not only can rush the passer, but can actually run defend. And I think that's something that they underestimated with the loss of Eric Armstead by just getting pass rushers to fill in and run blockers to fill in, run defenders to fill in. You need a guy who can do both. And I think Mason Graham fits that profile. I wouldn't be shocked. And I think that actually has legs.
Waltony 101 on Twitch says this feels like an extension of Kyle speak. He won't even guarantee a player will be alive tomorrow.
100%.
Let's bring in Levin Black. Levin, thank you very much for hopping in here. John Lynch said there's no guarantee that a deal gets done with Brock Purdy, but in his experience, when both teams are open to discussion, there's ample opportunity. I saw that as a giant red flag. How did you take Lynch's comments?
I take that as they are negotiating. That's what it means. They're negotiating. It's not we sent our first offer and it was in the ballpark, so we're getting close already. It's the two sides are not very close, which I don't think is all that surprising.
I mean, they've been able to negotiate for a long time. How are they still not close? How are they still not close if that's true? I mean, we know what the market is. We know what it is, Levin. We know who's at the top. We know who's at the bottom. Why can't they just take Trevor Lawrence's deal, add $5 million more a year on it, and call it a wrap? Like, this should not take so long.
No, and I would venture a guess, and I think it's a very wise guess, that the Niners sent an offer at some point in January and haven't sent a second one, because that's what they do with everybody. We're going to give you a low ball first offer and then let you stew on it for a long time.
Jason, are you so you and Levin are basically teaming up on me that this is not as big a deal as I'm making it?
Let that Boilermaker cook, man. I think he's right. Again, I think this is early in the process right now. Obviously free agency is like a landmark where you want to get it done, which is March 12th. But, negotiations take time. And when you look back at the way the 49ers have negotiated, they called Kittle's negotiation a bloodbath. We talked about, when Bosa got in there and he got his deal, that they weren't happy with that, and then they caved, and then they caved to Aiyuk. It's just the way that the process is. It's frustrating. We don't all like it, but, this is pretty par for the course. So way to go, Levin. Let's get this guy.
No, I don't like this collaboration that is happening here. I don't like it one bit.
Get used to it. You should be used to it by now.
We can get back to the Brock Purdy stuff with Lynch a little bit later, but he did say a couple other things that I want to talk about. And since we've been going on about the Brock stuff for about 10 minutes, we'll pivot here. He said the thing that I knew he was going to say, which I think is an obvious lie, which is there's been a lot of interest in Deebo Samuel. The relationship with the team is good, he said, but there's interest in Deebo Samuel. It's so good, Jay, that Deebo has requested off the team and the Niners have said, yeah, we're going to try to honor that. But the relationship is good.
Oh, again, what if you want him to be truthful and say, well, we're not really going to do right by him, or we're upset, it's contentious. That just makes it seem like, obviously teams are going to wait for him to get cut. And I think that's what we think is the most likely outcome. But I think he's doing the right thing by kind of posturing a little bit and saying, yeah, there's a lot of interest, and almost putting pressure on teams like, if you want to get your guy, man, you better come get him because someone else is looking. You don't want to say, hey, it's been nothing but tumbleweeds through here about Deebo Samuel. So, I think he's doing it the right way. I think it's shrewd, and he's negotiating a little bit, through the media.
I think what's going on with Deebo is I don't think there's a ton of interest in trading for Deebo. There's a lot of interest of people wanting to add Deebo. So they are calling because Deebo's agent has permission to talk to him and doing more of a free agent talk. Okay, what kind of money are you looking for in a new deal? They're prepping for when he's a free agent. I would be surprised if the Niners have been offered more than a sixth. I think no team has probably offered a 5 at this point. There's no reason to. It is clear the Niners will have to cut him.
Waltony 101 on Twitch says Levin calling his own guess a wise guest is peak Levin. Shout out to the Twitch fam. Love the comments. The Unfaithful Perspective says Jason and Levin, I love these level-headed takes, especially because the Niners routinely blow them up.
Yeah.
Well, that's fair.
Yeah. When it comes to negotiations with big targets on the team, they do. You can be level-headed, and you continue to be level-headed, and then training camp comes, and it's like, well, hold on here. Okay, the team's being stupid. And then preseason comes, and you're like, wow, everybody's being stupid. And then all of a sudden the deal gets done. That's what happens.
The constant thing always with the 49ers, expect the unexpected. When they zig, you zag. So yeah, the level-headed takes, they will be proven wrong because there's always something, isn't there? And there will be no offseason complete without at least a little bit of drama.
C. Pinky on YouTube says Rob likes to over-exaggerate as he should. He's the host. Look, you could say I'm over-exaggerating, but you guys just laid it out. I mean, they screwed around with Deebo. They screwed around with Bosa. They screwed around with Trent Williams. They screwed around with Kittle. Like, how many times does this have to keep happening? I should be reacting in this way when they throw out a giant red flag with the quarterback, the guy that's the most important guy to your team, that supposedly they love the most and the best and all that stuff. And John Lynch gets up there and says, hey, there's no guarantee we get a contract done. That stunned me. He never said that any other time he's talked about the negotiations.
Put yourself in the Niners' shoes, right? They don't have to budge at this point. One, they don't have to get this contract done all that early because it's not like getting the contract done saves them any money, right? It's not we need to get this contract done so that we have money saved to go spend on free agents. No, it's going to cost them money from their free agent pool, from their salary cap. So they just have to keep that in mind when they're looking at free agents. We need to set this aside because we know we're going to pay Purdy, but they can easily say, we're not going to allow a first-year cap hit of more than X. And if they say that, then the Niners can essentially count that money as spent and go into the negotiations with Purdy saying, this is where we're at. And once free agent hits, the money's going to be spent. So it's in your best interest to get it done before we become more constrained when it comes to the cap.
And honestly, I think one of the more interesting quotes was John Lynch saying that the roster needs to get younger and they need to reset their cap number. I think that's far more interesting than something that right now is probably in the infant stages of the negotiation. I think that puts a lot more people on notice than we thought initially. And them talking about a cap reset means there's going to be some tougher decisions. And I think we expected roster turnover, but it might be some people that we didn't expect to not be here next year. I thought that was very interesting.
Juice.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say one can hope some of the older players go because they've been a little too loyal. I can understand it to a certain extent, but I think there are definitely a couple players that were on this team last year that it was obvious, no, they're past their prime. They shouldn't have been here last year. And there's a couple players that you didn't realize were past their prime, like Deebo, where last year proved, oh, this guy's got to be gone. I think there's a handful of long-term vets that should be gone from this team. I think you do need to reset that locker room to a certain extent. It's not just about, well, they're not really worth the money anymore. I think you also need a tone change. As I've said to Rob multiple times, they need to break up that Cabo clique because it's not doing any favors.
It's a big disrespect to Trent Taylor, but it's brave of you, Levin.
Hey,
Yeah,
George,
that's not one of the vets I was thinking of.
Blair Kittle already put out the picture from Cabo this offseason. We already saw it. George was there. Brock was there. The Cabo click's in full effect, Jason.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I like Trent Taylor being there. I was just like, one of these is not like the other. But hey, I guess when you're in, it's like you don't ever get to leave. But yeah, I mean, I think there is a little bit of, I think we've kind of seen from the outside a little bit of favoritism, and especially I think that's been the frustration, especially with Deebo Samuel this past year, is the idea of like a Deebo game plan and it's just not working. And it's like, hey, you've got a tight end performing at an all world level, maybe span the tight end a little bit, just like, maybe Arizona does with Trey McBride or the Raiders do with Brock Bowers. And it's just, you kind of see a little bit of force feeding. And yeah, you want to spread the ball around and keep the defense guessing, but it just feels like these moments that you're trying to get the ball to these guys does come off as favoritism. Is that my opinion? For sure. Is that something that is guaranteed going on? I don't think so, but I think from the outside looking in, it would be fair to assume something like that.
Another thing that John Lynch said that made my head kind of tilt a little bit is what he said about Christian McCaffrey. Quote, CMC is doing great, doing really well. And apparently Lynch said he thinks Christian will be ready for at least parts of the offseason program. At least parts? I mean, he's been out of action for a long time. You're telling me he's not going to be ready to go 100% in August, or I guess technically April, phase 1 of the offseason program starts. But like, I thought his dad said a couple weeks ago he's going to be fully healthy. Now all of a sudden he might miss part of the offseason program. Again, don't love hearing that, Levin.
I think there's a different way to have taken that. Not that he can't do all parts. It's that Lynch knows Christian McCaffrey is a older vet. He's not going to show up to the entire offseason programs. Some of the voluntary ones, he will stay out. That's how I would take it, is that he doesn't want to put it out there that he expects Christian McCaffrey there for every offseason workout.
My goodness, a Boilermaker and a Hoosier are just lining up together. I think that's the same way I looked at it, is Christian McCaffrey doesn't need to do all of those things. And I think regardless of how he was going into the season, injury-wise, they still weren't going to have him do all those things because you want to have him healthy. In this regard, I think the wording is kind of funny. It's like, hey, he's going to be around for parts of it, so you can laugh at that part. But I don't think that was anything that was a departure from what they would have been doing regardless of his health going into this. Again, I wasn't moved by this one. Man, Levin, you're on fire today, man. I got to say.
Rob brings it out of me. Rob has the bad takes, so somebody has to pick it up, You
know what? Look, that would be a change for Christian McCaffrey. What did we hear about Christian, right? He was full go. We always heard about how hard he was going. He was there for all the voluntary stuff. He was the guy that set the tone. Now, if you're telling me, look, they're walking that back because they're worried about his injury health, okay, but you could still say, hey, we're going to take it easy with Christian, but we think he's going to be fully healthy. I feel like that's a different thing. That's different from, well, he might not be ready to go for that voluntary stuff. So
I think Christian McCaffrey learned an important lesson. Father Time is undefeated. He can't do what he was doing at 24, 25, 26. He put a lot of reps on his body in the offseason, and now he has, I don't know if you want to call it a condition, a long-term injury, whatever you want to call it, something that makes it to where doing that still is ill-advised, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of tie this into like an NBA thing, LeBron James isn't going as hard in practice as he used to. It's all about just getting him to the game. And I think that's what the goal should be, is just to getting him to the game, keeping him efficient, keeping him healthy, and not putting any unwanted stress on his body in any way, because you did see how much he is needed, especially when it comes to the red zone. So yeah, I think this was going to be a part of the plan regardless. Plans change. And I think to Levin's point, when you're a spring chicken at 24, 25, even though that's considered old in running back time, especially coming off these injuries in 29 and how vital he is to your success, I think this is the optimal approach. And I don't really have an issue with it.
Kevin Gong on YouTube says, can you stop with the hot take? Every word means the world take. I don't come here for hot takes, man. I started watching you guys because you weren't hot take guys. It's off-putting.
What did I do?
No, clearly that's directed at me. Look, people like to accuse me of this. And you know what? Maybe I do get too emotional about this stuff, but I'll just say this. When Deebo Samuel scrubbed his social media the first time, I was like, hey, this is not nothing. And then a couple of weeks later, he requested a trade. And when Christian McCaffrey first got hurt, right, last year, what did they say right before week 1? Oh, it's not serious. We'll to get it taken care of. It flared up and he'll be back. And then guess what? He wasn't back until like week 11. They never come right out and say, hey, this is a major thing. So everybody that's telling me to calm down, I'm sorry. We've seen the history with the 49ers and comments and the way they talk about things, specifically injuries. I'm just telling you that raised another red flag to me. Doesn't mean I'm thinking Christian McCaffrey is going to miss the whole season. I just think it's not nothing when he says these things, Levin.
All I'm going to say is, Kevin, if you've not seen Toy Story, what does Woody do throughout every single movie? He freaks out at everything. Okay.
This is the perfect time to panic.
Yeah, this is what Rob's got to do. He's Woody. He's got to freak out at everything. And then he's got to have, all the other animals and toys come together to calm him down and reel him in. And then, occasionally he says something smart.
There's a snake in my boots. I didn't see that coming. I'm sorry.
There is a lack of, I think, well, I don't know. I don't want to speak for you guys, but in my opinion, among the 49ers press corps, there is a lack of skepticism when it comes to things the team says. I don't think anybody in the 49ers press corps outside of Grant is skeptical enough of what they say. Everybody just kind of accepts it. And even if they might know something, they don't really put it out there until well after the fact. Case in point, when they all knew that the veterans complained about Trey Lance and they got him sat down when they complained to Kyle Shanahan. So maybe you think I'm freaking out. I'd say I'm being skeptical. That's all I'll say.
I don't think there's anything wrong with skepticism. I think, again, range of outcomes are everything. I think when you're talking about Christian McCaffrey, sure, coming off those injuries and then the wear and tear, sure, you can be skeptical of how it's going to be. I don't think that anything that was said would make you more skeptical about his probabilities of bouncing back. Like, I think that's something as well too. I don't think that anybody's saying that it's not fair to be skeptical, but when I hear a plan and him saying parts of the offseason, I think that's pretty par for the course, regardless of how his injury and how his season was going last season. So I think that's what I mean more than anything is that statement didn't move me from something that I already thought I knew before John Lynch said that.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been accused of not being skeptical. I am the wet blanket over here. I have everything I'm skeptical on. I'm skeptical right now of what Rob is thinking as he's looking at me on the computer. Yeah. For the podcast people, he just flipped me off.
I didn't even see that. Damn it.
Nick Ellert says, for all three of you, more likely to be a Niner, Mason Graham, Trey Hendrickson, or Walter Nolan. There were some rumblings about if Cincinnati can't get a deal done with Trey, if they weren't willing to meet his demands, that they would move him. Jason, you're in Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm.
I would love Trey Hendrickson on the 49ers.
My goodness. I mean, he's one of the most underrated, unheralded pass rushers for sure. If I was giving a guess of the three players that Cincinnati has to try to get under contract, who's the least likely to come back, it's got to be T. Higgins. When you think about the defense for the Cincinnati Bengals, it was more a problem with skill on the roster more than it was, it was more just Trey Hendrickson, doing everything. If they lose him, my goodness, there's no defensive coordinator that could save them at this point. So I have a hard time seeing him leave. And now we found out today, Walter Nolan is somebody who grew up a Niners fan. I thought that was really interesting. And yes, the question was asked if he met with the 49ers. He did. But what I like about his game is going back to what we were talking about with defensive tackle, run stuffer, and also a pass rusher, just like Mason Graham. So Mason Graham might require a trade up. Walter Nolan feels like a spot where if they stick at 11, they could. So I guess me giving you that answer is just if they stick at 11, Walter Nolan. If they want to move up, then obviously Mason Graham. But I just don't think that there's a chance that Trey Hendrickson makes his way here.
To answer the exact question, most likely, yeah, it's Walter Nolan because of draft position and the fact that since he's not trading Trey Hendrickson, that's just a ploy to try to get him to budge. Look, as you said, Jason, they can't trade Trey Hendrickson because they already have a terrible defense. He's the only thing they have. But going past just the Cincinnati aspect of it, you're going to trade Trey Hendrickson in the offseason that a better pass rusher, one of the 2 or 3 better pass rushers in the league, is also on the trade market. That you're just not going to get the value if you introduce him to the trade market because Garrett is on the trade market. Like it's just ill-advised. There's no way Trey Hendrickson ends up traded.
The Cincinnati Bengals are a dumb franchise, and dumb franchises do dumb things a lot of the time. And Cincinnati, and they're cheap. Dumb and cheap is a combination. When you're looking for a trade partner, give me the team that's dumb and cheap. That's the guy I've got set in my sights. It probably won't happen, but man, I think there's some possibility that it happens. And if the Niners could ever add a guy that's had 17.5 sacks for 2 straight years to this defense, oh my God, him and Bosa, that would just be absolutely phenomenal, Levin. Don't poo-poo this.
I would love it. I would personally trade for Garrett. I would meet whatever the asking price is. I don't care. As long as it doesn't involve Bosa or some other crazy current player on the roster. But I mean, there's very few who I actually wouldn't trade in that trade. Like if Bosa, I wouldn't, there's no point of doing the trade for Garrett. But outside of him, like if they said, we want CMC for you to get him, yeah, there would be trades out there that I would be willing. Obviously the draft compensation is not going to be nearly as high, but there's pretty much every other player on the roster other than Bosa, I would be willing to listen to get Garrett. So like I'm all for getting a second pass rusher because I am sick of seeing Bosa get double teamed and held and not get called.
Yeah, and going back to Trey Hendrickson, he gets all the attention. I mean, Sam Hubbard's the only really other defensive lineman. BJ Hill's on that line, right? But yeah, I think what he's done is phenomenal. For sure, in a perfect world to get Trey Hendrickson, I just have a hard time seeing Cincinnati move away from him when the main issue with that team wasn't putting up yards and points. It was that they couldn't stop a nosebleed, and he was literally the best player on that team. So again, if you're ranking the 3 and most likely to stay or go, it's Chase is going to be locked up. I think Higgins is the one that if they have to make a tough move on, they would move him and try to replace his spot in the draft.
So John Lynch is doing the local media now. For people that don't know, at the Combine, they do the press conference, and then usually the local people get sort of a sidebar with the people from the team afterwards. Nick Wagner tweeted out, John Lynch says the team and Brock Purdy's reps are already having good discussions. They've got their thoughts. We've got our thoughts. We've just got to try and make it a reality. He's played really well. We know that. We have every intention of making him our guy. Intentions in February don't mean a hell of a lot, Levin. Again, that comment doesn't fill me with the warm and fuzzies.
I think you're looking for something there that doesn't exist. I think this especially that second half of that paragraph there is him realizing what he said to the national media and needing to calm it down a bit. Every intention of making him our guy. He can't say, we will definitely get a deal done. That's not good negotiating tactics. But saying we have every intention of making him our guy, and we've been talking and there's been good negotiations, is him trying to calm what he said to the national media.
What he said, 100%. Again, I think that was just a different way to say what he said earlier. And, again, Lynch is the master of the DC dip and swirl. You're not going to get anything out of him that is going to be, the only thing that, the one thing I will say that people have been able to pick up on is a little bit of the body language, like, rubbing the top of his head, like at times, that's fine. But I think with his words, he's not going to give you too much.
I don't think that John Lynch is a media master as much as both of you do. But thank you for admitting I was right. If he had to calm something down, Levin, then clearly what he said the first time was something. So you just
not that it was something, it's that it's being taken as something by some people. So he wants to clear the air and make it clear what he was meaning the first time.
So you mean John Lynch is watching this show? And
that's what I was just about to say.
No, he's sitting there looking at Grant Cohn going, oh crap, Grant's going to pick up on that. I better restate it.
I was just thinking that Lynch is, I have this picture in my mind of Lynch just looking like, all right, I got to see what they said, and that's what he's thinking right now instead of negotiating or scouting players or anything like that.
Absolutely. Nick Wagner, more from him now. Lynch said that the team and George Kittle's reps have had some talks on an extension, says the team wants Kittle to retire a 49er. Lynch says the issue will be timing because the team has other big business to handle, but, quote, that's something we all want to see become a reality. See, that's like more definite, concrete terms, right? We want Kittle to retire as a 49er. Okay, maybe I'm wrong, but which by the way, that's good news because George Kittle clearly deserves a contract. He's arguably coming off his best season, and for cap purposes, they really need to redo it. So good, get that done. maybe what that means is, they're stacking the dominoes, right, Levin? If we get Brock's deal done, then once Brock happens, we've got the parameters in place for a Kittle deal, and we could sort of knock down the steps of this offseason.
Yeah, and I think it might be kind of playing the game in that they probably have something already in mind with Kittle, but they don't necessarily want to pull the trigger on all the cap savings, because then Purdy goes, well, look, you got $90 million in cap space. What are you talking about? You can't afford it, right? So I think there's some of that, but they want to get the Purdy one done before they create a ton of cap space all of a sudden. The key, obviously, is free agency starts at some point, and they might not be there with Purdy yet, and they need to create cap space anyways.
Yeah, I think this is the most obvious of signings and extensions. And yeah, I don't think there's any way that George Kittle ever plays in another uniform. So, again, I think to Levin's point, when people are worried about the cap situation and how much Brock is going to come in, when you already have 50 million and you can do an extension with George Kittle, which will drop that. You can do an extension with Brock Purdy, which will drop that. You can restructure some deals and you have some money around, and the cap is going to continue to explode. This is probably the worst kept secret, is that George Kittle will sign and end up finishing his career as a 49er.
Another update from Lynch. He was not making any declarations on when Brandon Aiyuk will return. He says Aiyuk is, quote, doing well, but he has a benchmark check coming up soon with doctors that will give a better idea of how far along Aiyuk is in his recovery. Nobody has really been able to say anything definitive about when Aiyuk will come back. This is not unexpected considering the serious nature of his knee injury with ACL, PCL, MCL, cartilage damage. It sounds like this is very, very much up in the air, and that does influence what they're going to do in free agency and the draft, Levin, because if you take Aiyuk out of the picture, even for, half the year, now you're looking at Juwan Jennings, Deebo Samuel is not going to be there. You're looking at Ricky Pearsall. You need another wide receiver.
It does. I do wonder when that date is. He said coming up soon. Is it before free agency? If it is, do they wait and see? And if he ends up having a setback, for instance, then do you try to appease Deebo and get him to come back? Does that change your whole direction? If that is before free agency, I personally would not be trading Deebo until I knew how that checkup went. Granted, I also don't think Deebo's better than average free agents out there. I don't think Deebo is a starting caliber wide receiver. I think he's a gimmick at this point, and that's all he brings. But if Aiyuk has a setback and it's, now he's looking at maybe middle of the season, he can get back onto the field and maybe be up to speed by playoffs. At that point, I'm probably not getting rid of any of my wide receivers on roster and might look at bringing in one.
Yeah, this is really interesting because the timing of this Deebo trade with the uncertainty of Aiyuk's timetable, it almost pushed me, after the season was over to say, man, I think there's a way where Deebo comes back. So now you're placating Deebo for the trade request. You don't know when Aiyuk's coming back. The 49ers certainly have to add free agent wide receivers. Elijah Moore is only 24 years old. It'll cost you $4.5 million per year. He's a separator. I love the idea of it. Everybody's high on Ricky Pearsall, but do you know for a fact that he's going to be able to take that step? Can he be there at X? I think Juwan Jennings showed a lot, but as a separator from the X position, it has to be schemed more than it is him being just a route guy. And almost every single one of his catches is a contested catch. Now, he's an excellent contested catch guy, but you do need some guys who can separate. So it's going to be really interesting to figure out what they do. I do think that there are guys out there that you can have for cheap without blowing up your plan. And you can allow Brandon Aiyuk to slide right back in. But this is really interesting because, for all intents and purposes, if we're going off of what is being said, the two receivers that are going to be starting on day one are going to be Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall. And do you think the 49ers are confident in that? I would probably say no.
I would have to agree with you. Just got to pivot really quickly. I just saw this tweet, and this is infuriating to me. Ian Rappaport says, Raiders minority owner Tom Brady and Matthew Stafford ran into each other at a ski resort in Montana. The meeting was unplanned and was not extensive or in-depth and did not include Brady hosting or recruiting Stafford, despite reports saying otherwise. Why is it that every time Matthew Stafford is on the trade block, he just happens to magically run into one of the teams that are very interested in trading for him? He was hobnobbing with Sean McVay in Cabo when he went from the Lions to the Rams. And now when the Raiders are seemingly very interested in trading for Matthew Stafford, he just happens to bump into Tom Brady in Montana.
If I'm not mistaken, Stafford has an off-season house in Montana. So I'm pretty sure everybody in the league probably knows where he skis at. If I'm not mistaken, that he lives in Montana in the offseason. So a unplanned meeting is bullshit because Brady would know where he's skiing and what resort he's going to because he lives there.
There's that skepticism.
My God, to be an acorn on a tree to see that, Matthew Stafford's getting ready to go down a slope, and Tom Brady just pulls up. Hey, fancy running into you here, Matt.
Which one of these is the NFL quarterback? Oh, the two 6'5" guys over there.
I think I would say this. Look, as a lifelong Raiders fan, I believe that the Raiders have to do everything that they can to bring Matthew Stafford and take him away from the Los Angeles Rams. There, I said it. I had to make sure it got out there.
I mean, do you think Tom Brady spends a lot of time in Montana? Do you really?
The guy doesn't.
Anywhere on the planet? And please, they met and there was no recruiting. Give me a break. Tom Brady's the same guy that was meeting with the Dolphins on Stephen Ross's friggin' boat when he was trying to engineer that whole thing with Sean Payton. Give me a break that there was.
How did that get out there? Like, I want to know who's the person that saw it and got it out there to the media. That
Brian Flores in his lawsuit.
Or are you talking about the Montana?
No. I'm talking about this one, the Montana one. Yeah, how did this become known? Because, if they're in full ski, they're huge guys. But at the same time, if they're in full ski, I'm not going to be at a ski resort going, oh, that's definitely two people that were NFL quarterbacks talking, and there's some collusion going on there or illegal stuff. You know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't know it's them unless they did it without ski gear on. And if they did it without ski gear on, what are you thinking? Like sitting at the restaurant in the ski resort, do you think somebody's not going to notice?
I think that's what it was, is they went in for some hot cocoa and someone was in the ski lounge and they saw them, canoodling and talking, and, that's how it gets out there. I mean, football's a funny game, but I think it's pretty funny that, you have the instance with obviously the 49ers and the interest. And we heard Stafford say, hey, I thought I was going to be in San Fran. And then obviously that didn't happen. And then something like this is happening. It's all kind of lining up, but it's just this whole like Brady as an announcer and owner thing. It's like blurring lines right now. And I think the NFL is like bending over backwards too far, because I don't think they would let this happen with any other player.
All I'll say is, Tom Brady, don't go for drinks until that trade is done. That's all I'll say. Because if you think you're trading for Matthew Stafford and then you go for drinks and poof, he gone. So just, a piece of advice. The only football.
Does anybody know what the Rams are doing? Like, I still don't. I haven't put much weight into this all offseason because why would the Rams trade him?
I think it's similar to the strategy that a lot of people have with Brock, who are hesitant to pay him for whatever, the market is okay, go see if someone else will. And when you find out that they won't, then come back to us and we'll figure it out. But it's also kind of been put out there that Matthew would take a little bit of money to come back in, like a less money to come back in. So I think this is all just kind of like, go see what's out there. And when you don't come back with it, come back to us and we'll figure it out.
More updates from Nick Wagner now on Dre Greenlaw. Lynch says talks have been ongoing. The hope is that a deal can be struck before free agency, though Greenlaw may test the market first. Hopefully we come to an agreement, Lynch said. We've been having, so we'll see if we can progress it. That's what Wagner wrote. Obviously, there's some words missing there. But it seems like there's interest on the 49ers side from bringing him back. But I just feel like someone is going to offer Dre Greenlaw more than the 49ers are going to offer. And at this point, I don't blame Greenlaw for taking it, Levin. I
don't blame either side. There's a lot of risk there for a team side. And at the same time, Greenlaw has not had his huge payday. He got a medium-sized payday. So if somebody's offering a big payday and the Niners aren't, then I think he has to take it. Like, it's the difference between being rich and being generational rich, Right now, he's rich. He could have enough money to where he's set up for multiple generations to be rich. But every single one of these quotes for John Lynch, you can cross out the name and just put in any name you want. We're talking to him. We hope to come to an agreement on an extension. All three are extensions, technically, new contracts on players they already had. Like, none of this is, we've talked and we hope to sign them. That's nothing new.
Yeah, and I think there is a lot of, and this is just me going off vibes, and and again, it's not something that I know, but I think there's a lot of still optimism around Dre Greenlaw, because he did in 30 snaps kind of transform the 49ers defense quickly, and they only played 4 snaps, I think, or 2 snaps in the Miami game after. So anything that you're worried about has to do with injury related. I think if anything, he showed that he was just as explosive, just as fast, just as decisive as he was before. And I think that they're plenty of teams that are going to roll the dice on that idea. Like, because if you hit, you're going to add him to your linebacker core. And, obviously the first team that jumps out to you is Houston, pairing him back with Azeez Al-Shire, when you still have, you're not paying CJ Stroud, that feels like a perfect glove in hand fit. And you know what, if D'Amico feels like he gets a chance to talk to him and they get his medicals back, I wouldn't be shocked if Houston's throwing out some money to him. I think the 49ers are holding out hope that he'll take a 1-year prove it deal, and then they'll figure it out again next year. But I think there's, like Rob said, I think there's definitely going to be teams that are going to roll the dice because the reward is far greater than, you getting a player who may be on the downside of his career due to injury.
And I think that's a smart move by the 49ers. If you can get him at your number, great. But if not, you have to let him go. There's too much risk there. And that seems like hopefully the smart play. And we'll see what ultimately ends up happening with Dre Greenlaw. Jason, thank you so much. I'll let you get back to networking and hobnobbing and, get your reservations in for your dinner tonight. And hopefully we'll hear from you again soon with you can empty the notebook for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys. And Levin, being in Indiana, man, there's a lot of Purdue stuff here. I don't like it, but you know what? Me and you, we can bury the hatchet today because I think we took it to Rob pretty good.
Yeah, would you still feel this way if Indiana hadn't just beat the doors off of Purdue?
I would not, and that's a good call.
Oh, man. All right. Thanks, Jason. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, guys.
Jason Aponte from Indianapolis. Thank you so much for all the work you've done for us, Jay. We really appreciate that. Levin, I'm shocked you didn't take my side. I really thought you were going to be on my side.
This is standard operating procedure. It's not that I'm sitting there saying all of these negotiations are going great. They're not going to end up getting drawn out. It's that this is what the team always says every offseason about every negotiation. They could sign him tomorrow. They could sign him in freaking September.
I don't know. When Lynch puts those qualifiers in there, I feel like that
he puts their qualifiers in there on every single thing. That is his MO. His MO is I'm not going to take a hardline stance on anything.
He didn't do it with Kittle when he was talking about Kittle just now. From the second they started negotiating with Aiyuk, what did he say? Oh, well, we got a lot of big contracts. I don't know. We got a lot of big deals.
The team didn't want to bring back Aiyuk.
That's what the truth.
The team didn't want to bring him back. The team wanted to trade him. They didn't want to pay him what he was worth.
I think that that this Brock Purdy thing is not as, much of a lock as a lot of the 49ers insiders have painted it this offseason, and we'll ultimately see if it gets done. Luis Fernando Aguilar Alonso says, has John Lynch already been asked about Brian Griese? Yes. Here's what happened with Brian Griese. His contract was up, and Griese didn't want to coach anymore. He missed his family. He wanted to spend time with his family, so he decided not to coach anymore. This isn't like the 49ers fired Brian Griese. He didn't want to do it.
Yeah, and I don't blame him. I wouldn't want to do coaching, put it that way. Like,
it's hard.
You could offer me, hey, we're going to make you an assistant coach on the 49ers. Obviously not a positional group, but bring me in as like the lowest level coach on the staff and get a chance to learn. I don't see me taking it. I would love the opportunity 10 years ago, but I know what coaching is in the NFL, especially on the lower end of coaching. He was a quarterback coach. It means you're going to be working 100 hours a week
for very little money. Robert Saleh once referred to his early start in coaching as we were the bitch boys is the term that he used. And that's his term. So that's why I'm using it.
Yeah. There. Well, Brian Griese, to be fair, wasn't there. And
no,
while you're not going to get wealthy being a quarterback coach, it's not bad money either.
But it's not any less work too. Like you're still putting in long hours as a quarterback coach. Yeah. So it's not an easy life. That is the point. Gray Fox 198. Thank you very much for the super chat. Says, when can we expect to hear from Robert Saleh? Good question. I would love to hear from Robert.
For however long they can possibly delay you hearing from him.
Yes, that is exactly the answer. You probably won't hear from him until the start of the offseason program, I would imagine, maybe in April.
I'm guessing he will be there in the post free agency press conference. I'm guessing he'll make some comments on whatever defensive players they signed. Because you got to keep this in mind. He wants to be a head coach again, so I'm guessing he wants to be in front of the camera to a certain extent. He doesn't want to be forgotten about.
Oh, I have no doubt that he wants to be heard from for sure. That's why I was wondering, is he going to show up at the combine? Because he can hobnob with other teams and other people while he's there, do some networking. I don't know if he's there. I haven't seen anybody talk about him being there. Doesn't mean he's not, but I just haven't heard that yet. Ethan Parrish, thank you for the super chat, says, I'm a Purdy guy, but if the Browns call and say Purdy and CMC for Garrett, you could draft Genty and get Kirk and Rodgers, and you'd have to consider it. If it was just Purdy and Christian McCaffrey for Myles Garrett, I would 1,000% do it. If it, no draft pick compensation, I would 1,000% do it.
Yeah, so would I. There's, like I said, there's not too many players that are off limits when it comes to getting Myles Garrett. Nick Bosa, not because I think Nick Bosa is the most valuable player on the roster. He's obviously in the conversation, but it's because if you're trading Nick Bosa for Myles Garrett, you're just moving laterally, so there's no point.
Daza 0187. Sorry, I missed this the last time. Daza says, what does it say about Nick Bosa if we keep wanting to put another elite defensive end alongside him? Who's alongside Garrett, Crosby, and TJ Watt? It's a fair question. I don't think that Nick Bosa needs another elite guy to be really good. I think he's really good right now, but it only makes his job easier and it only makes the defense better. It's just like no team says, well, we already have one really good wide receiver. We don't need another one. Like, no, if you can get another one, get another one. So
to be fair, TJ Watt has Highsmith, who is a double-digit sack guy who has been paid a big contract. So TJ Watt has some help there, but
Crosby doesn't.
Yeah, Crosby doesn't. And yeah, Nick Bosa has not produced. I mean, we've been critical of him. He has not produced like he should have based on what he got. He's been producing like a Pro Bowl caliber defensive end who is paid to be an NFL Defensive Player of the Year defensive end.
I think that is all the super chats. By the way, one thing here before we wrap it up, the odds for Deebo Samuel are out. And of course, I need to zoom in on this. The Commanders, Washington Commanders, still are the number one team, plus 200 to be Deebo Samuel's next team. Adam Peters was asked about it, Levin, and he said, not going to comment on it. He's under contract with another team. That is a smart man who's using the tampering rules as a way to get out of having to say anything about Deebo Samuel.
I do still find it interesting that the 49ers are not on this list right here. Like, do I think it's likely he comes back? No. Would I put him inside the top 10? Yeah. And you got, I guess, okay, sorry. I see now it's Deebo Samuel next team, if not 49ers.
Yes.
So they take 49ers out of being a possibility. Okay. Never mind. I'll be quiet now.
There you go. I need to cut that drop up and use it for all time. So thank you very
You're
much.
welcome. I knew when I was saying it, you were going to say something.
What, did you expect me not to? I mean, come on. By the way, if you want to bet on this, please do it with BetUS. If you do, you can receive 150% on your first deposit and 125% on your second and third deposit, up to $2,000. All you got to do is use our code YouTube150 to get that sign-up bonus. They have a fast and easy withdrawal process. They have 24/7 personalized service, 365 days a year. So thank you to BetUS for that, and thank you to BetUS for sponsoring this video. Levin, the only other thing I wanted to get to is the results of the NFLPA survey have come out again. The 49ers, for the most part, did well. There was a lot of A's that the players gave the 49ers, which, of course, you always like to see. A couple of things bugged the hell out of me. One, the Niners are one of only two teams that don't offer free childcare. They charge $40 per kid. Like, Jed York, what the hell are you doing, Jed? Cover the childcare. And also, the showers frequently break and the sauna frequently breaks. What the hell? Fix the stadium, man.
Yeah. These are things like, yep, it's very easy to fix those two things. Do I really care? No. These are things like they're on the list of important things for the team to be rated highly of. These might be the two lowest. I care about an owner who wants to win. I forget all the different categories, but there's a lot of categories about like quality of the team playing, for instance. That's a bigger deal than these things like that. The showers breaking frequently. You probably got to rip out and redo the bathroom to fix that because it's probably a plumbing problem.
It's such a bad look, though, because it's so fixable. That's the only thing. The Niners have a ton of money. It's an easy, get a plumber, get in there and fix it. Like the fact that they allow it to continue, it just like, I don't know, it doesn't feel like something Eddie DeBartolo would have allowed, during his tenure. I didn't like it. I thought it was a bad look. The only other thing that they mentioned was with the training room and the training staff. 83% of 49ers players report they receive enough one-on-one training treatment. That's 24th out of 32 teams. The players feel the training staff slightly contributes to their overall success, ranking them 25 out of 32, Levin. When you hear that and you know the team's injury history, what is that a red flag for you?
That probably has to do with, I forget who did the article. It's been a few years, but there was a big article about how the team's training facility is amongst the smallest, or not training facility, training room.
Yeah, that was the survey.
Yeah, is one of the smallest, and the way they built a training facility, there's nowhere to grow that training room because it takes from the locker rooms, and they can't because they're already bursting at the seams in the locker rooms. So that to me is the training room is just not big enough. It's hard to get one-on-one time when you walk in and all tables are taken.
Fix it, man. You've got money. When you've got money, you can make anything happen. And it's been a complaint for a while now. And injuries have been a huge problem for this team in Kyle Shanahan's entire tenure. So it is frustrating to see that continue to come up year after year.
At least we don't have a Gronkowski that we know of. Did you see that? I saw an interview. I actually don't know how old the interview is. It was a Patriots documentary. Gronk used to go out, get smashed, go into the locker room. He would go straight to the facility from the bar, lay down on the training table, passed out. When the trainers would show up a few hours later, they would just put an IV in him while he slept. And then Gronk would wake up feeling great, thinking he just slept it off.
That is the least shocking thing of all time.
Just
Rob
just popped in my head talking about all these training rooms. Yeah, he literally used to just go pass out on the training table, and they put an IV in his arm while he slept.
Gronk. Imagine how. Well, I'm not even going to get into it. Let's just say if somebody can poke your arm with a needle and you don't wake up.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just pointing that out, that's a thing that may have occurred. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the show. Thank you to Jason Aponte. Thank you, Levin. And once again, thank you to BetUS for sponsoring this video. If you want to sign up for BetUS, use promo code YouTube150. I'll give you the last word, Levin. John Lynch's press conference at the Combine today was
boring as... Yeah.